wonderful listeners, to our episode 25. Whoa. And Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025. Whoa, I just made that connection.
Episode 25 in the first month of 2025? This is some good juju. I can already feel it.
Yes, it is. Wow, love those vibes. Okay. So, in today's episode, we're going to be diving into how detailed oriented / small steps thinking and big picture / long term thinking can help you reflect on maybe some New Year's goals or plans to create New Year's goals, or maybe even just throughout your year when you're like, oh, I want to plan on doing this, or I have this goal, but I don't know how to start tackling it.
Yes, I think it's a perfect timing for this topic.
Yeah, yes, for sure. So let's get into it. So what is detail-oriented / small steps thinking? So just as it sounds, right? Small steps refers to taking tiny, manageable actions towards a goal, focusing on the immediate detailed process. So very much like in that moment,
Yes.
that particular detail. Small steps concentrate on completing the small tasks or actions and are often more easily manageable and can feel like less overwhelming because it's just this one particular step. And it also leads to consistent progress if we're continuing to do like one small step at a time. And then it also helps you feel like you're building momentum, like you are accomplishing not just a list of things to do, but like putting your intention in that one small thing. And then it can also help prevent procrastination sometimes, you know?
Yes.
Unless we get distracted like me.
Which is definitely a part of it.
All right, so what is big picture / long-term thinking? Also, like it sounds, right? It considers the overall context, the long-term vision, the broader implications of a situation, like looking into those things that are beyond the details. And helps you like really understand like the larger picture of something, maybe like an overall mission statement or an overall aesthetic you're trying to accomplish. Big picture thinking focuses on the overall strategy and the long-term goals, so it takes into account like all of those goals or all of those parts of the plan you want to implement. And it can also help you set the direction and prioritize key elements, like what order do I go in, or what task needs to be accomplished first before I go into this one. It also helps lead to better decision making and creating a strategic plan. Maybe it helps you look at, okay, does this element work better if I do it this way, or what's going to help with that future goal in the larger scheme of things.
Right.
And we're going to go into like some examples later because I know we're talking very generally right now, but yeah.
Yes. Well, I think good to have like a foundation, right, of what this kind of looks like for both parts of this. And as you were going through that, I hope the message too is clear that both of these are necessary, right? Like these both have to be a part of just like anything that we're doing in terms of like goals or vision or things around that, because they bring very important parts into the play here. And so I think before we kind of look at, how to go about incorporating these and setting these up for us, like it's important to also hit for a second of why it can be not the best or have a negative impact if we just sit in one mindset or the other. So I'm going to start by thinking about the small steps, right? Like mindset of this is, like you just said, really important because it focuses on like those really intentional incremental actions, right? Like this is great for us when we want to build habits. This is great when we are feeling overwhelmed, right? And we just need to break it down and take it piece by piece. But the problem then comes in is if I stay in this kind of mindset or this approach without having that big picture part in it as well, then things are going to kind of come up that really impact me from reaching the full directive or the goal here, because I'm almost like just sitting in one part of this without ever tapping into the other. So something that can kind of look like, right, potential negative impacts is, I think most obvious would be a lack of direction, right? If I don't have that big picture part of it, then obviously I'm not going to have a clear vision of what this big picture is. So I
Yeah.
could be taking all these small steps and these intentional actions, but for what purpose, right? Like, it's going to feel pretty aimless. It's going to feel like, what am I doing this for? Like, is this actually helping anything in particular? And so if I'm really focusing on tasks without that understanding of how it fits into a larger goal, this can really lead to me wasting effort, right? And having that lack of meaningful purpose in whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. I'm curious if like this also contributes to burnout.
That
You
would
know,
make
like we're just
sense.
doing these small things and like having no purpose or direction, and we're
Mm-hmm.
like, when are we gonna see some results, or when are we gonna like pause?
Yes. I don't know why, but when you said that, it made me think of like when you're in a job that's like really monotonous and you're like, this doesn't have anything to do with like the career I want or whatever, right? So I'm
Yeah.
just like doing this and it's like, what's the point, right? Like, I'm not feeling happy here. It's not nourishing me. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think you could see it on both sides of this, right? Like when we tap into the
Oh
big
yeah.
picture, like why that leads to burnout as well. So interesting, interesting. Okay. Next one is tunnel vision. So if I'm constantly looking and focusing on the immediate next step in front of me, right, then my perspective is going to narrow, right? Like, this is something to where I might not be seeing opportunities or recognizing problems that come up and might require that long-term strategic thinking. And so kind of being aware, right? I think the appeal for it sometimes is really helpful to have those small steps. But again, sitting in that of like how that negatively impacts me from even being able to have that long term critical thinking come into play.
Would you say this is like similar to like hyper focusing or hyper fixation? Because I know like
Yeah.
I'll get I'll experience that like
Mm-hmm.
in a task, and I'm just like in it, and then I just forget the other things that were
Yes.
part of the plan.
Literally. Yeah, I would say so. I think I think that's why people are like, you're hyper focusing on this right now because you're not thinking or tapping into anything else that needs to be done, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like if I have like X, Y, and Z things to do, but then I'm just focused on one, and then I just keep spending time on that, even if the time I allotted for the other things has already passed, then yeah,
Right.
that's a problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's a very accurate point of hyper focusing coming into play. So next one is slow progress on larger goals, right? So of course we know small steps are important, but if I'm not having that periodic it's not zoning, zooming out to really look at like what's the broader objective, what's the goal, what's just like, again, checking in on the vision here, then the progress I've made can be really inefficient, right? Like if I'm not doing that intentional almost check-in part. And we might see like we get stuck in the routines, and these routines might not even like serve the bigger purpose anymore because we're not doing those check-ins and those, what I would say, like maybe like remediations or changes to that to match the goal that we're looking at here. Um, Another thing is risk of stagnation. So if we're focusing solely on just those manageable incremental actions, then we might avoid really taking any type of risk or making bold moves, right? Because again, we're just so like focused on these like clear things that we have in front of us. And this might really impact like our innovation, right? Like, and my personal growth, because then it's really keeping me defined in this box that most likely is my comfort zone and not allowing me to look outside of it and grow in X, Y, and Z ways. Another thing is difficulty prioritizing, making it hard to prioritize in terms of if I'm so focused on small steps, because
Mm-hmm.
it can be hard for it to feel just as equally important in that moment, right? Which means that then it's going to
Right.
impact like how it's truly aligning again with my long-term goals. And this could also lead to, again, spending too much time on the less impactful activities or things that need to be done. Again, it could be that hyper focusing, or maybe it's just what feels easier or more fun to us. And so we're
For
like
sure.
naturally, spending more time on it.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely like comes into play here.
Yeah, I struggle with that one for sure.
I'm like, the nods of understanding are coming up, right?
Yeah, so much. I'm like, "Oh, this is fun. Let me like spend some time on this and like I'll get to that later. It'll get done."
And then it does not get done later. Let's just be clear. Another one is limited motivation, right? Like, I think we've all had that point of like, there are times when the little small victories and wins are super motivating. And I always like say, like, we have to celebrate the small victories, like, in order to keep us going a little bit. But I think there's something too of like, if we're not having these small wins and victories that are adding up into this big picture or this big goal, then it might not be like providing the same inspiration if we don't have, again, that meaningful purpose here of like all these little wins, right, are leading up to like this big picture thing that I want. So again,
Mm-hmm.
over time, it can feel like those small actions that I do are mundane or uninspiring, kind of overall. Another one is overemphasizing perfectionism. So if I am really focusing on executing like each small step in a perfect way, which quote unquote, there is no perfect, right? Then I'm going to
No.
lose momentum. I'm going to lose motivation because it's never going to feel enough for me. I'm going to get bogged down in the details. I'm going to forget that progress isn't even about perfection, right? Like if anything, it's involving an open mindset to recognizing things are imperfect, right? And that
Yeah.
adaptability and flexibility coming into play. And I think I see this a lot coming up too, right? Like even when working with students, right, is like that
Yeah.
perfectionism seeps in and then you get stuck in this and then you lose a
Yeah.
sense of that why again, or even just like managing all the things that have to be done.
For sure. Yeah. I definitely do see that in like creating study plans and then doing the studying and also like during test taking.
Mm,
Gosh,
yeah,
that's
it's
so
bad.
hard.
It is. It's hard and it's hard to get out of that, right? Like, and so definitely like if you're listening and that sounds very much like on par for you, like here's your sign, kind of thing.
For
Oh,
sure.
next one is lack of adaptability. So again, like if we're always focusing on the next step, especially if that perfectionism is like coming into play, it's going to be harder for us to adjust to changes, but also to want to adjust to changes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
circumstances come up or when we get new information, we need to recalibrate, like that part's going to feel real hard and maybe like we have some resistance to it altogether. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because like that
Right.
big picture perspective, like we're going to have that adaptation to unexpected challenges and things coming up that we need to pivot.
Right. Like, how can this new piece of information help this moment, or even, like you said, make us feel resistant to even adjust to the change? And then we just stick to that original, like, small step plan that we had, and that can create a lot of issues.
Yes, definitely. And I think too of like you hear people all the time that are like, I'm just not good with change, right? Like, and I think there's a lot of factors to that, but it also makes me wonder too of like how much of this could be coming up around that as well, you know?
Yes.
So interesting. Okay, another one is difficulty measuring success. So, of course, like small steps like create this progress, but again, if we don't have that bigger framework in mind, like we're not going to be able to really measure, right? Like whether
Mhm.
we are moving closer to those meaningful achievements or that big picture. So again, that can create this lack of like fulfillment in what we're doing because we're not able to like really like accurately see if it is something I'm making progress in or not.
Yes. My gosh, that just reminds me of like in our work with students of like creating like small intentional changes,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in not even just the behavior change of trying something new to help you feel better, but like the small change of even talking to yourself differently or treating yourself differently. And then, like, oftentimes I know I'm met with, like, "That's so small and that seems so easy, but it's just so difficult to do." Um, and I'm like, "Yes, but it's so meaningful."
Right.
And oftentimes we do lose track of, like, measuring those small steps and, like, looking at the big picture of, like, "Wow, I have made a lot of progress."
Mm-hmm.
Or I know there's, like, I've also experienced this where you had, like, have this certain judgment or, like, perception of a small step, like, it's not meaningful enough or
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have a bigger impact, but not noticing it can lead to not measuring your progress if you're just
Mm-hmm.
consistently trying to keep up with that.
Right. Right. It almost like then it feels like a double-edged sword, so to speak, in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
which I think, if anything, that's a good like point of view of this podcast episode is that like both are necessary, right? And like leaning too far either way like has its own repercussions and consequences potentially. But that's a really good point. And also makes me think of going to the last one here, which is what you brought up earlier of like that sense of burnout being able to come up, right? Like if we are noticing like I'm struggling to not lean one way or the other, right? And I am also almost maybe oscillating between the two sides and hitting this like double-edged sword like part, then that's also going to be something that impacts like what's the point, you know? And feeling again
Yeah.
that burnout come up. Um which as we said, right? Like this is something that does come up around this because if I'm focusing on those small actions without seeing maybe the cumulative impact of things, that's going to drain me, right? Like it might make me want to work hard on individual tasks without really feeling the payoff of achieving something larger. And again, like I think as humans, we only have the capacity to work on things that we can't see or know like big picture for like a very short amount of time. Like I think it could be
Yeah.
like a one-off potentially every now and then, but like
Mhm.
it's not going to be something that's sustainable and can be like the go-to and main thing. So, and important for us to think about. But also, let's shift a little bit because that was definitely the negatives of leaning too far into the small steps
Yes.
mindset. And so let's look on the other side, right? If we're going to go to the other side of the spectrum here, then what are the negative impacts of being in just the big picture mindset, right? And so thinking about this part of it, the big picture mindset like is really valuable, right? Like it comes up again for us to be able to set long-term goals and understand these overarching visions that we have. But of course, there are downsides to it, and this really comes up as when we notice that this big picture mindset becomes the dominant or default way of thinking, right? And so what might that look like? Well, first one is I'm going to feel overwhelmed or almost a sense of paralysis, right? When I'm focusing entirely on the big picture, right? The scope of it, the scale of what needs to be done, this can feel so overwhelming. And we hear this all the time, right? Of like, I'm just looking at this big thing like graduation, right? Or becoming a nurse or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And that feels overwhelming because I haven't taken the small steps and
Right.
feel that out of like, this is the things that I will do to work towards that. So it becomes very overwhelming. And then we might question, like, how am I going to achieve this, right? And this can lead then to that analysis paralysis. Say that 10 times fast. Which is really just like the fear coming up of failing, right? Or just even
Yeah.
the sheer magnitude of the task preventing any type of action, right? Because then I go into this like freeze mode almost of like, this is so overwhelming. I can't even think where to start. So, like, I'm going to shut down, right?
Yes. Yeah, I've definitely heard of that analysis paralysis within the sense of responsibility
Mm-hmm.
for another person's health, like in the nursing or OTPT programs.
Yes.
And then just like, wow, I am responsible. I will be responsible for creating a treatment plan
Mm-hmm.
to help. these people? Like, what if I'm not helpful?
Mm-hmm.
And then we just get frozen and we don't study until 2 days before the test.
Are you feeling called out right now, listeners? Because if you are, like, we still love you, but also sometimes we just need to hear, and be called out.
For sure. Yes, for sure.
The next one is neglecting immediate steps. So this is when I have a strong focus on what the big picture is, but in that I can sometimes undervalue, right, the importance of those small incremental steps, right? And we need to keep in mind that success is really often built on those consistent small actions, but a big picture mindset makes those feel a little too insignificant to matter sometimes, right? Where we get so stuck in the big picture that we discredit all the things that we do, And I think that's where the sense of
Right.
like what I talk a lot with clients about is like you have to celebrate the small victories. You have to celebrate the progress over just like the goal that I want to achieve. But in that, if we're leaning too far, right, again, like we're going to lose that appreciation almost and acknowledgement for the little things because it doesn't feel as important because it's not the big picture thing that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Next one is, again, the perfectionism and the unrealistic expectations come up. Surprise, surprise, right? Like, we also think about if I'm in this like big picture mindset, I'm envisioning ideal outcomes, right? And those ideal outcomes can a lot of times lead to really unrealistic expectations about what's going to happen, what could happen. And this all or nothing mindset can really breed perfectionism again, right? It makes people hesitant to move forward until those conditions feel perfect or exactly how I envisioned it. And sometimes this can also make us give up entirely if the progress doesn't match the grand vision. So again, that lack of adaptability in here of like, I want it to look like what it looks like in my head. And if it looks anything different than that, then like I'm going to call in the towel, right? Instead of pivoting and changing.
Yeah, I know that I've worked with clients that experience this, and oftentimes there's like an underlying fear that it's not perfect, and then that somehow
Mm-hmm.
means something about them and their work ethic. So
Yes.
then, like, we shut down or like we neglect everything else to make it perfect and stress ourselves out.
Yes.
So, also, like, maybe addressing that fear, or
Mm-hmm.
just even noticing, like, I feel scared, like,
Yeah.
that it may not be perfect.
Right. Yes. Which I think is important to even like call out and admit in general, right? Like me being able to say out
Yeah.
loud, like, this is what's going on, kind of gives us
Mhm.
some power back and the ability to feel like we're in control. And so, yeah, that's a very important point. I love that. Um, Next one is difficulty staying present. So again, if I'm focusing too much on what that long-term goal is, like it is going to be so hard for me to be in the present moment, right? And again, appreciating the progress, appreciating the process. So people are going to miss out on the opportunities for the growth and the joy and the here and here because we're always chasing that sense of what's next, right? Or again, that vision. And so you think about
Yeah.
it, like if I'm up in the clouds of like the ideals and the visions, I'm not present,
Or
like point
maybe
blank
we
period.
don't. Yeah, for sure, and, like, we maybe sometimes miss out that we are in the vision, like, we are in
Mm-hmm.
that grand big picture, and we're like,
Yes.
"Oh, wow," like, "I wish I could go back to that moment."
Yes, for real. And then you're like, well, crap, like what was I doing, And then it's like, well,
Yeah.
like this is honestly like a big thing that comes up. And I think in a lot of ways, and it's a challenge to put yourself into that mindset of catching that I do that and being able to ground myself and cope with that. So, next one is again the burnout coming up, the loss of motivation. Big picture goals are often requiring like a significant amount of time and effort on our part. And so, without those visible short term wins, we can call it, motivation's going to wane and go away, right? And so, feeling disconnected from those tangible things and tangible progress can really lead me to burning out and even again abandoning the goal altogether, right? Overlooking contextual changes. So if someone is fixated on the long-term vision, we might ignore the evolving things that come up with life, such as circumstances changing, such as opportunities coming and going, right? And changing in the flow of time. And this requires a shift in focus. But if I'm in that rigidity of big picture plan, again, I'm not going to feel open to that change. And we saw that similarly with the small steps, right? Like you're going to feel so like
Yeah.
staying in my comfort zone, narrow perspective, that I'm not going to feel open to that adaptability and that change part. And so that's a big thing to keep in mind too, is if it feels like I'm having a hard time even being open to looking a little bit different, right, than what I envisioned in the beginning, then maybe I am really struggling with not tapping into a balance here between the two. And then the last one is strain on relationships. So big picture thinkers may unintentionally overlook the needs or even input from others, right? Especially people that are in our life or the people that, like are important, like their
Yeah.
opinions and their ideas are important to us. But if I'm in this kind of mindset, then I'm going to be more shut off from that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and if the people around me are more focused on those small step or day-to-day realities and things to do, and that's not where I'm at, like that can feel very just like not important. I'm just going to keep doing me kind of thing. And this can create a lot of tension, like not only in like our professional relationships, right, with coworkers, bosses, whoever, but also in our personal, right? Like that can definitely come into play.
For sure. I also notice this with clients trying to prioritize, struggling to prioritize the small versus the big picture goals of their daily life. Like, I have this overall goal of I just want a clean house so I could study or
Mm-hmm.
feel better studying, but the priority is to study because I have a test coming up or I want to like have this grade, right? But then the priority of having the clean house gets in the
Mm-hmm.
way, and then it's like, which one do we choose? And then that relationship within yourself gets like this tug of war of like,
Mm-hmm.
what do I do? How
Yeah.
do I take care of myself? Where's the balance?
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is an important segue, right? Of like the
Yeah.
balance is the part here that needs to be put as a priority and achieved here. Because as we've seen, like issues come up on both sides when we lean too far, and they're both a vital part of this and is really just necessary for us to be able to move forward in an efficient and sustainable way. So now I'm going to let you switch it over here and talk about how to put that into practice a little bit.
Yes. So, yeah, so how do we combine the like smaller steps and big picture?
Mm-hmm.
How do we merge the two? It's important to notice like when combining the two, the inspiration for the big picture with the practicality of the small steps, you can create not just your own unique, authentic plan, but a sustainable approach to success. So it's about being intentional, having consistent actions, because it does require, like we mentioned, step by step, but also keeping in mind this overall arching goal.
Yes.
So, first, start with the end in mind. So, envisioning what that end goal or that end result would be.
Mm-hmm.
So, defining your big picture, your vision or goal first. This will act as your like guiding light, as your like light at the end of the tunnel, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
Help guiding you, keeping your smaller actions aligned with your broader purpose. Right. So, like with the cleaning the house situation, it's like, okay, I want to feel good, confident, and able while studying. And I
Mm-hmm.
do that the best when I have a clean, not messy house. Okay, I'm going to spend 15 to 20 minutes just picking up. I'm not going to do a deep clean. I notice myself wanting to like go in and like get all those crevices, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do a general tidy up, maybe put a candle on, and then get out my studying supplies.
Yes. Yes. Nice balance.
Yeah. So, like breaking down goals into milestones is the second step. Divide the big picture into medium term milestones and then further into actionable daily or weekly steps. This can create a bridge between dreaming and doing.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that sentence when I was creating this, like dreaming or like wishing or hoping, or like even envisioning yourself completing a task, but then actually accomplishing it or being in action. It's like we often forget to notice when we are in action or we're in the doing part of it. So breaking it down into those milestones, super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Step 3 is regularly zooming in to the goal or to the picture, into that detailed mindset, and then zooming out. I love to use that metaphor in a session with clients. Like, let's zoom out, let's take a bird's eye view
Mm-hmm.
of this whole picture and like tell me what you see. Because oftentimes when we're in conversation, we like are so in it, like we only have this one angle or this one perception, that like zooming out and zooming in can help us see different steps or different perceptions that we didn't think about.
Yeah.
So that can look like scheduling time to reflect on your progress and recalibrate. Love that one. Weekly or monthly check ins allow you to zoom out and assess whether your small steps are still aligned with the big picture. This can also allow you to maybe integrate changes to your plan, like
Mm-hmm.
adjusting if you get any new information, or maybe a life circumstance popped up or something unexpected, then we can readjust there. Step 4 is to celebrate both small wins and big achievements. And maybe we can elaborate on this a little bit, because I often say what you shared earlier, like I'm telling clients to celebrate their small wins,
Mm-hmm.
but it first comes with recognizing them,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging them, noticing them, and rewarding yourself for completing the small steps
Yeah.
while keeping the bigger vision in mind. And it reinforces that connection between your short term efforts and your long term success.
Mm-hmm.
And clients often get stuck of like, and I know me too, is how do we celebrate ourselves? How do we celebrate these small wins?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I always suggest or recommend, that's when you learn about yourself, or you like spend some time thinking about what makes you most happy, or is like what's fun to you or what's
Mm-hmm.
relaxing to you. And sometimes people, it's like, I need a break. I'm going to watch a 20-minute show, or I'm going to go get a sweet treat, or I'm going to go for a walk. Like
Mm-hmm.
it depends on what's fun, what's good for you.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, like, it can also be as simple as like I take a minute and just like acknowledge and show some appreciation for what I just did, right? Or what I
Yeah.
completed when I definitely could have done anything else, right? Like, and so it doesn't have to be like super complicated, but also I think like sometimes we deserve to have like maybe a little bit like longer of a reward or something. Like, I know I'm a fan of treats, so
Yes.
whatever feels like it resonates and works for you.
Yes, for sure. Like, even like you said, that just change of talking to yourself, that like
Mm-hmm.
that pause, that intentional, you did good, like I'm proud of you,
Right.
you got this. Yeah. So, okay, so step 5 is embracing flexibility. So allowing yourself to revise the big picture as you grow and learn, and adjust your small steps accordingly. Balance means staying adaptable to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard one time that like the word change can sometimes feel similar to the word conflict,
Oh.
because sometimes, a lot of the time, we're so resistant to change because we're so like dedicated to what we want to accomplish and how.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I'm curious, and this is what I work on with students as well, is like how to embrace change or even invite change. Like if you see like you're working on your goal, but then it's not really exactly what you wanted it to be, or it's not coming, the small steps aren't like look or feeling like how you want them to, you have that power also to implement change.
Yeah. I also, maybe this is a little bit more like on a different side of looking at it, but I also think, and we'll talk about it in the sense of like, we have to put our ego aside a little bit here,
Yes. Yeah.
because as you were even talking about like allowing yourself to like revise the big picture, right? To grow and learn. A big thing that I think comes up sometimes when we set this big picture is that we assume when we set that big picture that we knew all the things, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
we were the wisest and most capable and all the things to make that big picture vision, right? And so
Right.
when it comes up to something of like, oh, we're going to have to pivot, we're going to have to change, we're going to have to, X, Y, and Z, I think sometimes there's some resistance to that because that feels like an attack against our like intelligence, right? In a way.
Yeah.
And so I think then it's like, how do I check in with myself of like, even like why this feels like I'm a little resistant to it? Is it that it feels scary, right? Is it that I feel some sense of like embarrassment that I am having to pivot or I didn't know it all, right?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
really being able to say like, okay, like where's the sense of coming from so I know how to move forward. But also then it's the part of having to say like, this is a part of the journey altogether. Whether it's like this certain big picture goal that we're working towards, whether it's life in general, this is the part for me of being encouraged and giving myself permission to learn and grow and make mistakes and pivot and have change, because that means that I'm doing this thing called being a human and
Literally.
actually like making so much more progress than I'm giving myself credit for. But yeah, I don't know. I always like lean into that part of it of like how much is it like just a struggle for me to admit, right, that maybe I didn't know everything.
Yeah, that is such a good point to make, like, honestly. Like, and noticing if that's another area of growth, right? Another
Mhm.
thing that we could practice realigning ourselves to treating ourselves differently.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
We would treat like our friend or someone else outside of ourselves with like
Mhm.
some understanding and like compassion of like, hey, that's okay. Like, you didn't have that information before, or like, you know, don't be embarrassed, or like it's totally normal to feel that way. But sometimes when it comes to ourselves, we're like, hold on,
Mhm.
we should have thought of all the possibilities before. And we're like, that's anxiety.
And also the perfectionism probably coming in, right? Of like, why do we
Yeah,
assume that I should just know everything? Like,
right.
what's happening here? Why am I like expected to be so much like, I don't know, just like really unrealistic expectations. But anyway, that's a whole different podcast episode.
Yeah. All right. So final step is to use tools to stay organized. Tools like vision boards for the big picture and task lists or planners for smaller steps can help you visualize and execute your plan simultaneously. Love that. Love the idea of a vision board. Definitely have a never ending task list going on. And sometimes that can also include other tools like maybe roping in your support system
Mhm.
or a mood tracker to help you
Mhm.
check in with yourself when you are maybe in the like throes of that perfectionism, or even just noticing yourself doing something great, like I'm hitting my final step right now and I'm seeing my bigger picture come to fruition.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think too of like that's the part then also of like, can you give yourself permission to use tools, right? And use your resources versus feeling like I should just like be able to do this without any other type of help or assistance.
Right. So I put like a short example, we've been giving examples or giving little touches of examples throughout our podcast today, but one is like a big picture goal is like achieving a fitness goal of running a marathon within a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will be the big picture. And then the smaller step goal underneath that would just be to exercise or run for 15 minutes each day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Maybe that could be one part of this, of the one smaller step of their bigger picture. Another one could be like research marathons in my area, or
Mm-hmm.
research like goals, or maybe look into what is it called? A running group.
Yeah. 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 Like, what attire do I need?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that even thinking about that, right? Like, I could imagine a lot of people being like, okay, but unless I'm like able to actually run a marathon, right? Like, that's the only part I focus on. And that's the part then to challenge yourself of like, me preparing for this marathon, me doing the research and looking into and doing all the things that I need to do beforehand, like that is important
Mm-hmm.
too. And that deserves recognition because like you're not going to be able to run a marathon without doing all the baby steps to get to that. Like, let's just be clear.
Exactly. Getting all those steps in, literal physical steps, and these planning steps
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is going to help you feel like you can do it.
Yeah, 1,000%. So also just give yourself some grace in that too, right? Like, it doesn't have to be super crazy, big task things all the time. Like,
Exactly.
but thank you, friend. That was a great example.
Yes, of course.
But with that, we are getting to the end here of our episode. So we're going to wrap up with our normal quote of the episode, which comes to us from the wonderful Martin Luther King Jr. And I
Love
didn't
him.
think that I would find a quote by him that would be perfect for this episode,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I did. Like, and I think
Yeah.
honestly, it just like makes this like big picture where like and small steps thing so universal across so many areas of things. But the quote is, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase just to take the first step, right? And I
Wow.
think sometimes going back to the sense of like I can feel overwhelmed, right? Or I can feel like there's so much pressure on like big picture and no recognition on anything under that, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
think if anything of taking just like some recognition of yourself or even just taking that first step, right? Which could be again setting a big vision, right? Or setting your goal and putting that. It could also be like, what's the first little baby step of progress that I'm doing on this journey? Or even listening to this podcast episode, right?
Yeah,
So
for
giving
sure.
yourself that credit that's deserved. But
Love
with
it.
that, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of When Life Feels Messy. You will join me next time. Not Ash.
Thank you, wonderful listeners. Yes, Erin will be here.
Yes, I will be here and you will not. Because you're going to have
Ash
a
will
whole baby.
be talking to a baby.
Yes. My gosh. I literally can't wait to see a video of you and your baby recording a pod. But next month's episode, we will be talking about navigating just the creation of your chosen family and what that looks like. So stay tuned. I'm excited to be with you next month. I'm also nervy, but that's okay. We're going to make it through. But with that, thank you again for listening. We hope you had a wonderful New Year's and a good start to 2025. And we will see you
Mm.
next time. Bye.